I was just talking to Ben actually about my role with InterVarsity. I've been working with InterVarsity for 25 years now. And I've worked on campuses, I've worked as the area director of Maine, I've worked as the supervisor for all of New England, and currently my role is to focus on our staff and our student leaders and their spiritual formation. So how can I help, through our whole movement, see Christ as the center point of people's life, growth, and development as missionaries on campus? And I love the work that I get to do now. Really like kind of fuel to the fire, to help the arrow to shoot straight, or kind of all kinds of other images come to mind. But we've seen unprecedented growth in people coming to Christ in the last few years. I've often thought about revival, but this is the first time I've actually started to feel it in the campus context. And that comes with increasing opposition and marginalization of our communities on campus too. There's many schools now in New England where we're not actually allowed on campus, and yet we're seeing growth like we've never seen before. So it's a pretty exciting time to be in ministry in the university, and I have a lot of hope for our future and our country, seeing what's happening in that realm. So, well, when Chris asked me to come and teach and preach, I was attracted to it mostly because I've wanted to actually come and worship with you guys. Knowing Chris so long, I've longed to be part of this plant and to see God's work in the area. But I was a little hesitant because my schedule was pretty full. I'm leading some retreats coming up. I've had a lot of different opportunities in the region that I've been a part of. But I decided, to ask more about it. So I said, well, Chris, what about the topic? Like, is there a certain area you want me to preach on? And he highlighted your vision statement, people brought to life by the good news of Jesus Christ. And this is what Chris said. He said, well, honestly, my thought is this topic should be pretty cut and paste for most anybody in InterVarsity. Cut and paste, huh? So I did that. Yep, anytime, Chris. So he was trying to alleviate my fears of prepping, that I can handle this, but I thought that was a pretty funny statement. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to give you my cut and paste sermon. One of my weaknesses is I can't preach two sermons. Like I have a whole thing of teachings I've done, and I have a hard time just pulling it up and doing the same thing, because I often feel like I want a fresh word for fresh people. And so I did that for you guys this week. But I want to confess two things to you first around this topic of people brought to life by the good news of Jesus Christ. First, the mission I work with, that's the whole reason we're there. Right? We're not a church. We're a mission agency on campus to bring the good news of Jesus Christ to every corner of every campus in New England. That's why we're here. But second, not a day goes by where I don't feel inadequate to that, and I wonder, what am I doing? Because this is hard. And it doesn't come naturally for me. I'm not a gifted evangelist, but I care deeply about God's word going to every corner of every campus. And my guess is that my story is pretty common to most of us. Right? God doesn't gift everybody as an evangelist, and yet he charges all of us to bring the good news as far and wide as we can. And so today I don't want to be the expert up here speaking, but rather I want to look at this statement that you have as part of your vision, and I want to bring us to start imagining it and holding it deeper into our hearts so that it actually has a place of energy for each of us. And I was excited even working on this teaching because I felt like it did that for me. So to do this, though, I want to do two things. One is look at the words of Jesus from John 10, where he declares that he's the good shepherd. And secondly, I want to work backwards with this statement. So start with Jesus Christ, then look at the good news, and finally, people brought to life. But pray with me as we jump into the passage today in John 10. Lord, enlighten us, open our hearts and our minds to what it is you want to communicate to us today. And may you bring us a little bit more into life through this. Thank you. John 10, 7-16. Therefore Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. Let's start with the end of the statement of Jesus Christ. I want you to imagine with me this scene. Okay, you're gathered with some colleagues or neighbors at work, home, or somewhere where you gather. Might be the gym. And the conversation turns to what's going on in the news today, perhaps with ISIS and some of the terror that's happening around the world. And one of the people in your group pipes up and says, well, that's just the problem. All these religions fighting and being so intolerant, thinking one's better than the other. I'm telling you, if we could just get rid of that problem, we could take care of a host of problems in this world. You're sitting there, and you kindly and respectfully and gently and in the most casual way, warm way possible say, well, actually, I believe there can only be one true religion and only one true God. And I believe that's found and revealed in Jesus Christ. He came and showed us that. He showed us the one true God who's unique, who made us, and who alone can save us from our problems. Religion's not the problem, but Jesus is the solution to all our problems. And it's not intolerance, but rather I think it's afraid of facing the truth that Jesus revealed that creates all the other problems. How do you think that group would react to you if you said that? Right? It's one thing, I can preach that, but if I get into a group like that, suddenly I'm like, I don't think I want to say that. Why? Right? Why? Because in our culture, that's not the way we talk about things, right? We're supposed to be tolerant, open. Yeah, these people are a little radical over here and they're doing things. We can call them extremists, right? But actually, if I look closely at this parable and what Jesus is saying, I might actually be labeled an extremist. Right? The problem in our culture is that we can't deal with what's intolerant. That's actually evil. When, we're intolerant about a lot of things. But central to Jesus, this vision statement that you have, people brought to life by the good news of Jesus Christ, is that Jesus Christ is in there, right? The reason we're a church is Jesus. And it begs the question, why can't it be about more than Jesus? Why don't we include other ideas, other beliefs, other ways that could also bring good news in life? Well, in this passage, Jesus says a few things. First, I am the gate. Second, I am the good shepherd. Third, I alone can bring life to the sheep. And fourth, I'm the only one who will give my life up for the sheep. What is Jesus saying here? Well, the context is this. Jesus just healed a man who was born blind. Nobody had ever seen that before. And the Pharisees, who were really in charge at that point of the spiritual lives of those people, brought this guy in because Jesus healed him on a Sabbath. And they wanted to incriminate Jesus as breaking the law of Moses, the law of God. And so they were highly concerned that this Jesus was, in Israel's language, a shepherd of the people that was leading them to death, away from God, into enemy territory. And so they challenged this guy, his family, and ultimately even Jesus because of this healing. And the people were debating about it. Who is this guy? Well, he can't be a sinner like these Pharisees are claiming because he healed a guy born blind. Nobody's ever done that before. And so it's in this context that Jesus gives us this pastoral imagery. We often root it out of that story and we think of shepherd. How nice, right? It's a comforting, warm image. That's not what Jesus is saying here. He's actually making some claims about himself. In Ezekiel chapter 34, Ezekiel brings up this image revealed by God in a prophecy he was given, that there are many shepherds in Israel, leaders, who are absolutely not doing the job that they're supposed to. Jesus is referring to them here as robbers, right? Thieves, hired hands. And that because of that problem, God himself is going to come down one day and be the shepherd for the sheep. So when Jesus says this, that I'm the gate and I'm the shepherd, he is saying within the earshot, and in fact to the Pharisees, that you are the bad shepherds, and I actually am God coming to shepherd the people of Israel. That's why the reaction, which we don't have in our text that I read today, is that they called him demon-possessed and mad, right? I mean, we wouldn't do that if we heard this parable. We'd think, oh, wow, he's really calling people to come after him because he's good. They're hearing it as, he is claiming to be Yahweh, coming and leading the people and incriminating everybody else that led them. How dare he do that? And it just charges them. I mean, think of the political debates in our country. This is even deeper, kind of that gut-wrenching feeling that people have, that how dare somebody make that kind of claim? And in fact, in John, this is leading to his death, right? It's these kind of claims that lead to his death. So Jesus himself is saying, one, I'm the way into life. I'm the way into the kind of life that God prescribed for Israel way back from Abraham's time. And two, I am that God that will lead Israel. It would be mind-boggling, I think, for the people of Jesus' day to hear this. But the inescapable claim of anybody that follows after this Jesus is that there is a God who's uncreated, beyond what we know, who made everything and therefore has authority over everything. This means that no pursuits that we undertake, no science, no sociology, no psychology, engineering, politics, journalism, nothing will ever be able to truly enable us to understand our purpose and the problems in this world if it's separated from that Creator. And our fundamental problem, according to that Creator, is we've separated ourselves from Him. See, Jesus, in claiming to be the Good Shepherd, is not just bringing a nice pastoral story to the people here or to us. He's poignantly claiming that he is doing the work of Yahweh to rescue humanity from their plight, and he is the only one who can do that. And so back to our little coffee room conversation with our friends, it has to be about Jesus. Our church as a whole, and this church in particular, we have to be about Jesus. We're not here to make people's lives better. We're not here to simply be a good influence in people's lives, another option. That's not our purpose. We are about Jesus, and he claims to have the authority over every heart, mind, and soul of everybody that we meet. When we start to grasp that, when that gets us in our heart, we see things differently. As I was driving down here, I just did a little exercise where everybody I passed, I just asked God to bless them. So I saw somebody crossing the street. God bless that person. You know their name, you know their heart, you know everything going on. Bless them today. And I just dreamed about what that would be like if God answered that prayer. He could change people's lives. He has the power to do it. I can't. I'm just driving by on the street. And even if I stopped and shared the gospel with that person and they came to know him, it would still be God working through me to do that change in their life. We have to be about Jesus and really trust him to do the kind of work that he calls us to do. And it begs the question, though. This is what it did for me. What is our real, unfiltered relationship with this Jesus really like? I have to confess, most of the time mine's just lukewarm. You know, I want more than what I have in my life with Jesus. You know, often in the work that we do, the mission work, I see my own deficiencies, and my reaction to that is I want to try harder, do more, or kind of get more all in, right? I need to surrender more, give up more, all that. That's kind of how I'm wired, right? I got to do it right. But often what's really lacking is not doing it right. It's actually my experience of Jesus' love. I haven't had that experience of being firmly rooted inside the sheep pen, knowing that Jesus is right there protecting me, and he's willing to and already has laid down his life for me. And I can embrace that and live it and own it, so that that's what comes out of my life in a way of gratitude. Somehow, even though I believe in this gate and this shepherd, I choose to live outside of where he's called me to be. And I'm working on my own at a feverish pitch while he's watching me, saying, come back in. Come back in. One of the aspects of my work is I walk with people in their journey of faith, leaders, at kind of every age. I work with 24-year-olds up to 60-something-year-olds. And the number one thing that I notice that is at the root of most of their struggles is this. It's their understanding of God, their picture of God that they have currently in their head. God could be boss, God could be distant, God could be any number of things, but Jesus is saying here, I'm going to give you a picture of what God is like. He's laying his life. The creator of the universe is willing to lay his life down for you. If we can get that in our hearts, then I think it comes out that we're able to be more boldly sharing about this person, Jesus Christ, and not being apologetic even in our culture. So the application is, what could you do to deepen your experience of the love of Jesus Christ in your life, just even now, even today? The second thing is good news. What is the good news? Often in my upbringing, the good news was referred to primarily as a transaction. Right? Me plus sin equals judgment by God and death. Jesus equals the sin taker care of. And me plus believe in Jesus equals eternal life to escape judgment and death. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. But it hardly depicts the power, breadth, and compelling nature of the good news that Jesus came to bring. Jesus in this story, I think, does a wonderful thing for us. He brings us into our imaginations, right? I think that's why he told stories a lot, is it takes you out of this kind of formulaic way that we often want to create our own religion, and it turns it into a sweeping narrative that we become parts of, character parts in. Here we picture ourselves as sheep. In Jesus' day, that would have been a familiar, very familiar thing. They would have seen sheep and shepherds even in the towns. And they would have known what it's like in terms of the bad news in this, right? Thieves, robbers, hired hands, right? That's totally an insecure place for a sheep to be. Is in any one of the care of one of those kind of characters. But when Jesus talks about the stunning picture of a shepherd that's willing to lay his life down for the sheep, that elevates the experience as you think of yourself as a sheep. And for any sheep that has any brains at all, which they do, even though they don't have much, they would choose the shepherd that would care for them in the way that Jesus is claiming. It's just a natural thing. Jesus, drawing from the story, from creation, through Israel to his present day, and into ours, is saying, yes, there really is somebody out there who will give their lives for you. But the question is, how do we get to a place where we can share that story, that good news, in ways that's compelling for our neighbor? How can we grow in doing that? I just want to give two stories of ways I've seen this happen. First is in InterVarsity, every spring break, our staff and students bring a mix of 50% Christians or people involved with an InterVarsity or Christian fellowship on campus, and then 50% self-claimed not Christian people. And they could be skeptics to seekers, any kind of thing like that. And go down to New Orleans or Tampa and work in relief work. Started with working for rebuilding after Katrina ravaged New Orleans. And we explicitly say that part of what we're going to be doing is connecting the work we do with the story of Jesus and what he has to say about it. Now, a good number of people would easily and naturally say to them, I'm a skeptic, I don't really care about this religious stuff, I'm just going down because I want to do some good. But you can talk about your Jesus stuff, that's fine, right? And that's a pretty normal student kind of world reaction, right? You can have your little religion, but I'm happy to connect with you in this way, but please just don't force it down my throat, right? Well, what happens is that during the week, these folks get a picture of the bigger story. They see that Katrina is not disconnected from faith in Christ and not disconnected from the care that God has for the world. And in fact, the Christian story probably has a much better picture of what's going on than any story they've heard before. And they start getting drawn in. We've seen remarkable number of people that were skeptics on the bus ride home, are seekers on the bus ride back, and within weeks are followers of Jesus Christ back on campus. Why? I think it's because we've learned to make the connections, right? It's not just about, quote, being relevant. It's actually about grabbing the hearts and minds of people, where they are and what they're caring about, and seeing the connection to the radically good news that we have, and making that connection explicitly. So it's really, we're ambassadors, right? We know a language and a culture from the kingdom of God. We're trying to reach people that have no clue about that. How can we make those connections? So for this generation, service is one of those connections that we can and should make. And then ultimately, most of us actually serve out of selfish motives. We want to feel good about ourselves. Very few of us are altruistic. But the message Jesus brings is that he actually is going to do something and set things right in the future, and he's doing something now through the church. Do you want to be a part of that? It's a compelling invitation. So another way I think we can translate is just to simply use our imaginations more in connecting the gospel with everyday life. The storm that ravaged the East Coast, but not us, last week, right? I love it. You know, living up here, it's like you watch that and you're like, you know what? We'd be at work the next day. Easy, right? Easy. Come on, bunch of wimps. But I was focused on, it's such bad news. You look at the news, it's like horrendous. I remember when one of the blizzards hit last year, my family and I were in California, and we were watching at breakfast in the hotel, and it's like, blizzard hitting the East Coast, and they're going nuts, absolutely nuts. Later that day, my daughter, who was 8 years old at the time, is on the bed crying like, I want to go home. She wanted to be in it, right? That's how we treat it, right? She's like, I don't want to be in California. I want to go home. But I imagined this week, what would it be like if the good news took hold of everybody's lives up and down the East Coast before this storm hit? What would the news be like? And I thought, this is probably what it would sound like. Today on the East Coast, a major storm hit, and everybody was having a great time. Why? Well, it was an enforced Sabbath. They took the day off. Nobody was worried about producing anything more because people share. Companies aren't competing. They're actually working together to make the world a better place and find a way to get the resources out, and we had to take a little holiday from that. But we'll get back to work soon because everybody's shoveling their neighbor's driveway out. Nobody died because everybody was looking out for each other. And so there was no unnatural death that occurred because of this storm. And we'll get back to work pretty soon, but everybody enjoy your day off. Wouldn't you like to live in a place that was like that, rather than millions of dollars are going to be lost because of this storm and people are stranded on the highway? Why? Because they're trying to get to work. The stupid people stay home, right? And why are we trying to get to work? Because we're so insecure. We think every day we have to work in order to get the money, in order to feed the kids, in order to, It's a trap. The good news of Jesus reaches down into the center of every single news story we have, and it busts it open and turns that story into something different. And I think if we can learn to think that way, embody it, and then say it, I think we can make a big difference. I think people want that kind of news. They hate watching the news on TV or on the internet. So 2 things. 1, use our imaginations to make the ambassador connections to the world that doesn't know that story. And the second thing is just get it out, right? I'm good at imagining. I'm not so good at getting it out. I'm less bold in that area. So that would be my takeaway, right? Is to take the things that I think about and say it more often. Yours might be to use your imaginations more. I don't know. But if we do those 2 things, I think we'll make progress in the good news. So we start with Jesus alone. We learn the breadth and the depth of the good news, and finally, the beginning of your statement, it's about life. This is it. The promise of Jesus is that he brings abundant life. So the other day, my phone decided that it no longer wanted to work for me. It wanted to be free of its servitude and to claim that it had its own identity. So I'd go to make a call, I'd hit the call button, and it would bring up the little screen that looks like it's calling, and then that would disappear and would go back to my contacts. I'm like, I'd listen, no ring. I'm like, that's just weird. So I'd call again, nothing. So finally I just turn it off, put it in my pocket. About 5 minutes later, it buzzes. I pick it out. It's making the phone call. Like, okay, hi, yes. And then all of a sudden it turns off in the middle of the phone call and it makes the other phone call that I did the second time and tries to connect the two like it's a three-way call. I'm like, why are you doing this to me? Then I sent a text, right? And I looked at it, it was like sending. I'm like, okay, it was a photo text, right? So I'm like, okay, whatever. I put it away. All of a sudden my thing buzzes, I get it, and it's from Lisa's mom. It said, why are you sending me 8 pictures? The same one. I'm like, uh-oh. My phone's deciding it wants to broadcast that text 8 times. So anyway, I went online to try to figure out if anybody else had this problem with his phone and see if I could fix it. And while searching, I was on one of these tech guys' blogs. And on the sideline was a picture of he and his wife and a little caption underneath. And it said, we increased our net worth by $50,000 in our first year of marriage. Sign up and find out how. Suddenly I wasn't thinking about my phone anymore. I was like, ooh, do I read this? This could be, why? What happened to me right there, right? I suddenly shifted from my problem, right, which deep down was more like, well, if I could just buy a new phone, I would, but I can't, and I'm trying to figure out how to fix this. So this $50,000, that could come in handy here. I bought in to something that was drawing me in to tell me that it had life for me, right? It's been noted that most Americans are exposed to 8+ hours of some kind of media each day, that we have direct access to over 300 advertisements, and 150 of those, we actually make a mental note about it. So this was a major mental note, the one I did here, where I just got, off my track. But 150 times a day on average, we note something and it grabs us, even if it's just a little bit. Right? We're constantly being sold life. Constantly. And like I did, we're drawn into certain messages that capture wherever we happen to be in the moment. And for me, it's like, if only, fill in the blank. In John 10, Jesus contrasts the experience of the sheep under different kinds of shepherds. And what Jesus offers here is to live under a shepherd that is willing to change the rules completely and give abundant life, compared to the other shepherds that you're used to having, the robbers, the thieves, the hired hands. And what he's describing when he says life to the full or abundant life is the Hebrew notion of shalom. And this is not the lack of conflict in terms of peace, but it's progress of what's good, right, whole, nourishing, refreshing, just, complete, right? It's the invasion of those things into our lives. It's a picture of being completely provided for in abundance, so there's leftovers, never scarcity. Having space to flourish, to explore, develop your interests and talents, to try new things with risk but without fear, and to give generously without feeling like you're going to be lacking. If I lived in that reality, I'd look at that little 50,000 net worth guy and be like, pittance, right? I've got far more. Jesus identifies here one of our core problems. Life through him is available for us, but we constantly choose other options besides that life. Recently, I was listening to the podcast of This American Life. It's an NPR show that's like storytelling of modern day America. And it was a fascinating story. It's called The Heart Wants What the Heart Wants. And in that overall framework was a story of a guy that I'll call Steve. He was single, not very good looking, socially awkward, owned a business, and at the time his father was dying of cancer. Never had a girlfriend, middle-aged. And he wanted a friend, and he saw an ad in I think a men's magazine or something, for a pen pal service where you could write to a woman and they'd write back to you, and you could just kind of do a pen pal thing as an adult. So he was interested, signed up, and found himself soon deeply encouraged and helped by a woman named Pamela, who was his pen pal. She'd write him encouraging words, boost his ego, give him hope, make him feel like a man again. But then she also asked after a little while for a little money to help with the cost of writing letters and sending gifts, which she would do. So she said, would you, just with one of your letters each month, send $10, and then, $10 a month, that'll help keep this going. And he didn't think anything of it. He just had a good business and good income, so he did that, along with thousands of other men who did the same thing. And Pamela was actually Mike, a con man who thought that this would be a good scheme to make some money off of lonely men. And it lasted for years. In fact, he invited all of the guys, if they wanted to come out and meet their pen pals, to come out. And Steve did this. He traveled out, I think it was in Minnesota, and came up and met Pamela, and then met Bob and John and Fred and all these other people that also met Pamela. And so Mike, who was the con man, inadvertently actually uncovered his scam by doing that, and was exposed. So Mike went to trial, and Steve and many of the other men came and defended him at trial. These are guys, he was jilted of thousands of dollars, and he came and he defended this guy from getting convicted. But he actually was convicted. But why did he do that? Why did he go to court and defend a guy that just robbed him? Because even though it was a lie, Steve felt that those letters actually did something for him. They changed his life. They gave him hope in a time of hopelessness. And even though Pamela wasn't real in terms of the relationship, a fake Pamela was good enough for him. And he actually still has pictures of Pamela, who worked for Mike as a letter writer, right, or as an administrator. And he used those pictures to send out to them as if this was the person. He still has pictures of her in his home. The point of the podcast is that when our hearts get set on something, we can't disengage very well, right? We're sold life. This points to the Good Shepherd. Mike came only to steal, rob, and destroy. He preyed on something fundamental that defines life for us, right? Relationship, being known, being supported. We may not be as socially awkward as Steve, but we're just like him deep down. We long for this. It's part of our DNA. And here's the thing. We live in a society of Steves and Mikes. We're grasping to get life, surrounded by other people who are grasping to get life. Thieves are stealing from robbers. And that's what we define as life, right? The good life is if you could get ahead in that game, right? Steve felt like even though Mike jilted him, he got ahead in some way. So he felt good. Mike, he made millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. And in the interviews that they did with him, he's out of prison now, he laughed about it. I mean, this deep guttural laugh, like just, these guys believed it, He thought it was funny because he made millions of bucks off of it. Jesus knows this. He comes in to reorder the game. He promises life so we can stop grasping. But here's the rub. The only way to get this life is to follow the Good Shepherd, and the Good Shepherd lays his life down. See, the only way to get this life is to lay down the Steve and Mike show and to accept a new way that is defined in a radically different way of living. This is what abundant life looks like for Jesus. We trust our Father for provision, so we give stuff away. We feel compassion for those who don't have life and reach out to them, even though they may be radically different from us and threaten us in some way. Rather than judge, we love those who hate us. We bring healing where there's pain and wounds. We notice those on the margins. And we let go of our pride, self-protection, greed, anger, lust for more, and we learn to be content. And ultimately, we're unashamed of our own needs and humble enough to express that we're needy people. Jesus invites us into that life Are we willing to go? So how can you, as an individual or as a church, press further into this kind of way of living, to get out of the Steve and Mike show and live fully in the abundant life that Jesus has for you, so that that's what you can give away to others? I've already heard examples of you doing that this morning. We've been traveling in reverse. Let's go back forward and think about this statement. People brought to life by the good news of Jesus Christ. People brought to life by the good news of Jesus Christ. Imagine what it could be like as a community if those words really came alive for you. Rochester, look out. People brought to life by the good news of Jesus Christ. May it be so. Amen.